Hey guys. Tonight we climb onto the creaky wooden planks of a ship where the cheese sweats. The hammocks swing, and death by dairy isn't even the weirdest part. You hear it before you see it, the low groan of rope against mast. The slap of waves against a barnacled hull. And the unmistakable sound of someone gagging below deck. The year is somewhere in the mid-1700s. The ship? Irrelevant. They're all the same once you step aboard: rotwood, sweat-stained hammocks, and provisions that might technically qualify as food, but mostly resemble cruel science experiments left too long in the sun. You step gingerly across the damp planks, trying not to slip on the smear of grease or that thing that might be a fish spine, or a rat tail. The scent that hits you is unmistakable: salt, mildew, and something that makes your nose wrinkle involuntarily. Cheese. Not the good kind. Not even the "it's aged" kind. No, this is ship's cheese, which exists in that gray moral zone between nutrition and biohazard. It's hard. Not firm, hard. More like blunt weapon, hard. You could knock out a sailor with it, which, incidentally, has been done. And yet, it is part of your ration. You, a perfectly decent human being who once knew what fresh bread smelled like, are now meant to gnaw on a slice of this rock disguised as dairy. And here's the kicker. You're actually one of the lucky ones. At least you're not in the lower deck, where the cheese has, over time, gained not only a smell but a presence. It sits in its barrel like a sulking ghost, sweating quietly in the heat, waiting to be spooned out with a dagger or a boot heel. Now, if you're thinking, hey, maybe they just didn't have refrigeration, you're right, but it's more than that. Cheese aboard an 18th century ship wasn't just old. It was weaponized, salted beyond recognition, hardened over months of sea spray, and jammed into wooden casks that may or may not have housed pickled fish in a previous life. Sailors weren't given a choice. Cheese came with your daily ration, usually alongside hardtack, which was its own separate heartbreak, and sometimes a bit of salted meat that had a suspicious sheen. But the cheese was what lingered. It was persistent. It was unforgiving. It was everywhere. You could wrap it in cloth, soak it in beer. Heck, you could even try to bury it in the sand at port. It would come back, and it would taste worse. Some crews used the cheese as barter. I'll swap you half my cheese for the last of your onions. A man might whisper in the darkness, desperate for something with actual vitamins. But this exchange came with consequences. The cheese, once yours, never quite left you. It stayed in your pores, your breath, your dreams. And you might think, okay, how bad could it be? Well, consider this. On more than one ship, sailors who had died during the voyage were found to have untouched cheese portions still tucked into their belongings. They had chosen starvation over another bite. You, dear sleeper, are now dining in the same tradition. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy little fleet of ours has sailed. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up on day 3 of the voyage. The sea is rough, the sky angry, and your hammock keeps swaying like a cheap amusement ride powered by nausea. Breakfast arrives in a wooden bowl. It's a chunk of cheese. The same one as yesterday. Only somehow worse. It creaks when you poke it. Creaks. You glance over at the sailor beside you. Let's call him Harris. He's missing 3 teeth and has a long scar that looks suspiciously like it came from a cheese-related accident. He gnaws dutifully, silently, like a man who has accepted his fate. You do the same. Some ships, usually Dutch or British Navy, actually prided themselves on the durability of their cheese. The quartermaster might boast, still good after 5 years. Which, in fairness, is also something you can say about a stone. Meanwhile, rats avoid the cheese. That's not a joke. Historians still argue whether this was because the cheese was too hard, too salty, or simply too intimidating. Whatever the case, the rats, those tiny pirates of the lower decks, would steal anything but the cheese. Which tells you everything you need to know. You finish your breakfast, your jaw sore from chewing, your gums quietly weeping. A pigeon lands on the rigging above you. You look up and, for a brief moment, consider whether it would taste better than your current meal. But you know the rules. Shoot a pigeon, get the lash, eat the cheese, get dysentery. Probably. And yet, this is life now. You, the ocean, the stink of your socks, and a wedge of cheese so angry it feels personal. Cheese is currency, not comfort. You've barely made it through another serving of tooth-cracking cheese when you begin to notice something curious. No one's eating their full ration. Sure, they might gnaw at it, grimace, maybe curse under their breath in a tone that suggests they're making peace with mortality, but very few finish it. And fewer still throw it away. Instead, they keep it, tuck it under their bedding, store it in old pouches, even swap it like treasure among the crew. Why? Because out here, on the restless ocean, cheese isn't just food, it's currency. And you're about to learn why a hunk of dairy product could get you more than you bargained for. The first thing you notice is how trades happen below deck. There's an entire black market economy running behind the first mate's back. One man offers a sliver of dried apple in exchange for a decent edge of cheese, not because he plans to eat it, but because someone else wants to use it to prop up a broken table leg. Another crewman, skin like driftwood, nose bent from too many fights, slides a wedge of his ration to the ship's cook. And in return, a ladle of slightly less salty stew. This cheese is grimy, hard, and utterly miserable, but it has power. Not because of its flavor, which is best described as briny regret, but because of its utility. When the ship's store runs low, cheese becomes a tool. Need to scrape barnacles? Cheese wedge. Plug a leak in your hammock seam? Cheese wedge. Threaten your bunkmate? Yep, cheese again. It's the Swiss Army knife of the high seas. Only with fewer features and more digestive consequences. Back in port, this cheese was known as ship's cheese, or hard cheese, a term that eventually evolved into slang for bad luck. And really, is there a more fitting name for something that slowly breaks your molars while breaking your spirit? Even rats avoid it, but to a desperate man stuck weeks from land, it holds strange value. Now, on many ships, sailors were paid a portion of their wages in kind, provisions instead of coin. This was partly practical, coins are easy to lose overboard, and partly exploitative, owners could cheap out by giving you cheese that probably shouldn't be legally defined as food. As such, a sailor's worth was partially measured by what sat in his kit bag. Salt pork, stale biscuit, and cheese, the trio of sadness. But of the three, only one could be reliably preserved beyond recognition. That's where the cheese began to shine. Not all cheeses were equal, either. Oh no, there were factions, alliances, secret codes about which batch had fewer worms or which barrel had less of that oily sheen. Word would get around, midship barrels gone green again. Stern stash smells like a wet goat in July. Sailors would swap rations based on smell, texture, even superstition. I'll give you a slab of dry biscuit for the one that doesn't scream when you cut it. Someone might joke. You think it's a joke. You hope it's a joke. And then there's the officer's cheese. Now that's a whole different scandal. You catch a glimpse of it once, soft, pale, edible looking. It glows like moonlight in the galley's lantern haze. A real wedge of Gloucester or Cheshire. Maybe even a creamy Stilton if you're really far up the command chain. You watch your commanding officer slice into it with a real knife. The blade gliding through it like it's made of clouds. Your cheese, meanwhile, requires a hammer and a small prayer. Historians still argue whether the officers truly got better cheese, or whether their stores were simply guarded better. One theory suggests officers had access to small personal stashes brought aboard at port. Another says they bribed the quartermaster. A third, more popular theory among sailors? The devil himself made their cheese. You hear murmurs of cheese hoarding in the lower deck. Petty theft becomes common. One man gets his toe broken in the night, no one talks. But everyone knows it was over a missing hunk of particularly dry ration. Someone else sleeps with their cheese hidden under their shirt, close to the chest, like a lover or a family heirloom. You begin to understand. Out here, cheese isn't nourishment, It's negotiation. And then, there's the gambling. Oh yes. On some ships, the nightly cheese game was serious business. Dice rolled over, turned over crates. Bets placed. One wedge says Jenkins vomits again before dawn. I'll raise you a rind if the wind doesn't shift by morning. Losers moan, winners chew. And sometimes, if they're lucky, they don't chew cheese. Your own wedge today is slightly less rigid than yesterday. Which, oddly, alarms you more. Is it softening because of temperature? Moisture? Decay? You scratch the surface. The top layer flakes like sandstone. Underneath, a darker yellow that suggests secrets best left buried. Still, you tuck it into a scrap of cloth. You might need to bribe your way into a drier hammock space tonight. And cheese talks. You hear stories of ports where cheese was more valuable than coin. In places with limited dairy, a single wedge of ship's cheese could buy you 2 drinks. A night on land, even passage on another ship. One legend tells of a sailor who bartered away his entire ration chest in Antigua and returned with gold earrings and a fresh tattoo of a cow. Probably not true. Still, every lie begins with something believable. And speaking of believable, there are whispers. Always whispers. That some of the cheese never really was cheese. That barrels mislabeled or mishandled were filled with some other substance, compressed meat byproduct. Perhaps, or worse, but no one can prove it. All that's certain is this: it tastes like betrayal and regret. And yet it remains the most commonly consumed solid item on the vessel. After the rats, of course. The cook eyes your ration when you pass through the galley. Still got your wedge? He asks. You nod. He offers you a scoop of something brown and bubbling in return. You pause. You sniff. You decide the cheese is marginally safer. So you move on. Pouch full. Teeth aching. Soul slightly bruised. Cheese might not comfort you out here. But in a world where the next sunrise isn't promised, and the next meal might include gravel, it remains the one thing you can count on, wretched, dense, and still somehow slightly powerful. And tomorrow, when another sailor comes sidling up, asking if you'll trade for a scrap of cloth or an old pipe stem, you'll weigh your options. You might say no. You might cling tighter to your yellow brick of misery. Because out here, on a ship full of ghosts, storms, and stomachs running on fear, cheese just might be the only form of security you've got left. Aged to peril. The ship's cheese stockpile. You descend into the lower hold, where sunlight dies. Time collapses, and the air smells like someone bottled despair. The cheese lives down here. Not the individual rations wrapped in canvas and contempt, but the stockpile, the motherlode. Crates upon crates, packed tight like coffins, each one sealed with wax and roped shut as if someone, somewhere, feared what might happen if they escaped. You approach a crate slowly, as one might approach a sleeping dog or a possibly cursed mirror. The wood is warped from seawater, and there's a white crust blooming at the edges of the seams. You press a finger to it. Dry, sharp, definitely not salt, probably mold, maybe. Salt and mold holding hands. You decide not to dwell. This is the ship's cheese reserve, rationed out over weeks, sometimes months, depending on the wind, the port, and whether someone has died recently, freeing up their portion for redistribution. It's a grim kind of math. One man's plague is another man's bonus cheese. You notice a name etched onto the side of the crate. Jameson, 1737. The current year is 1743. So unless Jameson's ghost is still aboard and snacking in the shadows, that's 6-year-old cheese you're looking at. Minimum. You pry open the lid. Inside is a slab the color of parchment left in the sun. Crusted and cracked like dried out mud. You think it's cheese because someone told you it was cheese. But your nose and your instincts beg to differ. This isn't cheese. This is history. Cheese meant to last long voyages was often made from skimmed milk. Aged until it achieved the density of a cannonball. Then packed in beeswax or wrapped in cloth and rubbed with lard. Some varieties, like Suffolk Bang, were so durable they were rumored to be repurposed as cannon shot in emergencies, though historians still argue whether this was an exaggeration or a terrifyingly accurate field report. You pick up a wedge. It's heavy, not just dense. but soul heavy. It carries weight the way guilt does. You knock it against the floor. The sound it makes is closer to a hammer on stone than any foodstuff should allow. If you threw this at someone, you wouldn't just injure them. You'd make a point. In theory, aging cheese improves flavor. In practice, aging cheese on a moving, humid death barge of sailors and rats does not enhance its culinary potential. It sours it, literally, and not in the good, blue cheese, kind of way. You cut into one slab and find not a creamy center, but a hard, flaky interior that resists your knife like it holds secrets. There's a whiff of ammonia. You blink back tears. And yet this is what feeds the crew. Once every few days, the quartermaster ventures down here with a ledger, a grim expression, and a crowbar. He opens a barrel, sniffs its contents, and logs its status. If it hasn't grown legs or whispered ancient curses, it's deemed fit for ration. You wonder what the unfit barrels are like. Actually, no, you don't. Sometimes, sailors get cheeky. One crewman swears he heard a cheese wheel groan when they shifted a stack. Another claims he saw something moving inside one of the sealed crates. These stories spread. Exaggerations, probably, but in a place where sleep is rare and hallucinations are common. Your mind doesn't always draw hard lines between folklore and fact. Fringe sailors, those who've spent too long at sea, believe the oldest cheeses on board have absorbed the souls of past voyages. Ghost cheese, they call it. Eat a wedge from the wrong barrel and you'll dream the drowning memories of a man who died of yellow fever in 1711. Not exactly an appetizing bedtime story. But when the food looks like this, ghost flavor might be an upgrade. Then there are the marked barrels. These have no label, no origin date, just a black mark painted across the lid. You don't ask questions about these. Some say they're filled with old cheese that turned toxic. Others say they're cursed supplies, barrels that kill anyone who consumes from them. One superstitious sailor claims they were pulled from a wrecked vessel drifting ghost-like in the Caribbean. Its entire crew gone mad from eating cheese laced with mold spores that invaded the brain. Again, historians still argue whether such cases were real, or if they were just cover stories for food poisoning and bad luck. But you learn quickly. Never take from a marked barrel. Back up top, you watch the cheese get doled out in chunks. The quartermaster scraping at blocks like a man trying to mine for shame. He has a ritual. Slice, weigh, sniff, frown, distribute. No one thanks him. You all know it's not his fault. He didn't make this cheese. He didn't ask to be the guardian of a dairy crypt. Still, his fingers stink of it. He eats last. The captain, meanwhile, keeps his personal supply locked in a drawer. Rumor says it's French, smuggled aboard. It has actual softness, the kind that requires cutlery, not a chisel. He doesn't eat it often, just a slice now and then while staring out at the sea like he's trying to remember how to taste feelings. You wonder what would happen if that cheese got out. Would there be mutiny? Worship? Maybe both. Eventually, the cheese you're holding ends up in your kit. A new wedge, freshly cut from a crate older than the youngest sailor aboard. It smells faintly of kerosene and disappointment. You hold it up to the candlelight. There are veins. Not blue veins. Veins. You take a bite anyway. Because you have to. Because this ship doesn't stop. And neither do your guts. The taste is complex. That's what they'd say in a wine review. Here, it means bad in 5 different ways. Salty, sour, dusty, bitter, metallic. Your tongue goes numb for a moment, then regains feeling just in time to regret it. Still, some part of you prefers this over the unknown. At least this horror is familiar. Predictable. Chew, wince, swallow, curse, repeat. That night, you dream of the crate marked Jameson, 1737. In your dream, it opens by itself. Something inside sighs. You wake up sweating. Welcome to the stockpile. When mold becomes a moral dilemma, you wake up to the usual orchestra, creaking timbers, distant coughing, the slap of the sea against the hull, and something else. A murmur, a low, scandalous muttering crawling through the lower deck like a secret rat. Someone found green on their cheese. Not just a fleck, not the usual grayish smear you pretend not to notice in candlelight. This is vibrant, mossy, and fuzzy. It's got volume, like it's trying to rise up and apply for a job. And now, the big question arises, to scrape, or not to scrape? Because here, aboard your floating coffin of salted flesh and groaning wood, mold isn't an exception, it's an inevitability. What matters is how much there is and where it's growing. If it's on the surface, well, scrape it off with the edge of your tin spoon and hope for the best. If it's deeper, well, you close your eyes and tell yourself that penicillin hasn't been invented yet, so technically you're doing science. You watch the young sailor across from you. We'll call him Fletch. Poke at his cheese with all the delicacy of someone defusing a bomb. He's new, still believes in things like fairness and edible food. The mold is thick, spongy. He looks around, eyes wide. Should I eat this? A grizzled voice replies from behind a curtain of hanging hammocks. If you can't smell it from 3 feet. It's still food. Not very scientific, but very nautical. There's a code aboard the ship. Unwritten and soaked in rum. If it's green, it's probably still fine. If it's black, flip a coin. If it moves, report it to the cook, but not before you consider negotiating with it. You've seen it all now. Sailors arguing about mold patterns like wine tasters. That's just rind bloom. No, mate, that's bad karma. Looks like it's starting a colony. The thing is, this cheese wants to live. You can tell. It sweats aggressively in the heat, takes on strange odors by the hour, and seems to whisper threats if left too close to your pillow. It evolves. You might cut away a patch in the morning, and by evening, it's grown back stronger, more confident. You're not eating it, you're battling it. Historians still argue whether this mold was genuinely harmful or just disgusting by modern standards. Some claim that the fermentation, even when overripe, might have offered rare probiotic value. Others insist it was a direct cause of chronic illness, even mental instability. One 18th-century doctor reportedly warned that moldy cheese could corrupt the humors and invite fever of the mind. Charming. Meanwhile, there are sailors who swear by it. They call it the rind of iron, and insist it strengthens the guts. One man once told you, with terrifying calm, that eating cheese mold daily had opened his third eye. That might explain why he was later seen trying to commune with barnacles. Then there's the cook. You corner him one day. He's hunched over a pot that smells vaguely of sweat and despair, and ask, "What do you do with the moldy cheese?" He shrugs. Cut off what screams. Use the rest. No sanitizing. No boiling. No vinegar. Just a swift knife and the unspoken hope that the heat of the galley will kill whatever tried to grow a mustache on your lunch. You're assigned to galley duty the following day. A punishment, technically, but also a rare peek behind the curtain. You're shown the cheese shelf, a board nailed above the coal bin. Each wedge is marked with a date and a scratch rating. 5 scratches means still chewable. 1 scratch means use in soup. No scratches means give to the cat. And if the cat dies, lie about it. You watch as the cook carves a chunk from a wheel older than your boots. Mold curls away from the blade like a fended fog. He tosses it into a pot with something beige. That'll cover the salt pork smell. He says, you don't ask what that something is. Here's the real dilemma. On a good day, mold might just taste bad. On a bad day, it might land you in your hammock for 2 days with chills, cramps, and dreams where the cheese comes back to ask you why. But you eat it anyway. Because hunger makes philosophers of us all. There's a deeper layer to this, too. A moral question. Not everyone aboard gets the same type of mold. The officers? Their cheese is clean, preserved, unwrinkled. Meanwhile, the lower deck wrestles with science experiments. You once asked if the moldy batch could be rotated out. The answer? No one important eats from that barrel. Chew on that. One night, a wedge is passed down to you that is so green, so suspiciously lively. It draws a crowd. There's betting. Will you eat it? Will it eat you? You stare into its veins, deep, cratered patterns that look like a landscape under siege. You lift it to your mouth. Someone makes the sign of the cross. You bite. It's damp, spongy, slightly bitter, also strangely nutty. You survive. For the rest of the week, you're known as Mold Mouth. A badge of honor. In a way, You're no longer a cheese victim. You're a cheese survivor. And in the brutal social order of the ship, that matters. The following morning, you catch a rat nibbling on a discarded wedge near the ballast. It takes 2 bites, then rolls over and dies. A crewmate claps you on the back. Better you than him, he jokes. You laugh. You try to laugh. The sound that comes out is a little hollow. You know now that mold on a ship is more than just a biological process. It's a challenge, a test, a sign of decay and resilience. It's the sea whispering, let's see what you're really made of. And apparently, you're made of moldy cheese and sheer stubbornness. Cheese and the scuttled stomachs. You'd think that on a ship where rats carry plague. Water turns foul by the 4th day. And biscuits come with a bonus helping of beetles. Cheese would be the least of your gastrointestinal worries. And yet, it's often the first culprit blamed when the crew begins moaning in their hammocks and clutching their bellies like their insides are trying to mutiny. It doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes the damage is subtle, like a sour grumble that starts deep in the gut. Then creeps upward like a foghorn made of nausea. But when it does hit, oh, it's the kind of chaos that clears the lower deck. Grown men weeping, doubled over, feet slipping on sloshed buckets and other people's regret. You learn quickly that the phrase, bad cheese, doesn't just mean bad taste, it means bad fate. The ship's doctor, who is also the barber, the chaplain, and occasionally the hangover therapist, keeps a little book of symptoms. In it, cheese-related illnesses have their own page, inked with growing resentment, stomach groans, gut lightning, cheese fever, and one dramatic scribble that simply reads, mortified innards. Blamed cheese. What's surprising is how frequently cheese gets named over everything else. Salt pork? Sure, it's greasy and suspicious. Biscuit? Crunchy and crawling. But cheese has a way of lingering. It sits in your stomach like a stone altar. It doesn't just pass through, it settles in and rearranges furniture. You feel it hours later, knocking politely on your spleen, asking to be noticed. One time, a man named Briggs went down after a particularly soft piece, soft being a very bad sign on this ship. He'd won it in a game of dice, and took 1 bite before turning a shade that can only be described as ghost sick. They laid him on the deck, dribbled rum between his lips, and whispered prayers. He recovered, barely. The cheese did not. It was tossed overboard with a ceremony that might as well have included bagpipes. Now, scurvy gets all the attention in the Sailor Sickness Hall of Fame. And rightly so. Bleeding gums, joint pain, teeth falling out like pennies from a worn pocket. But did you know that a lack of fresh dairy could exacerbate it? That's the cruel twist. The cheese you get might keep. But it sure doesn't help. It lacks vitamin C, contains barely any calcium after processing, and often spoils into something closer to poison than food. Historians still argue whether the cheese itself was the cause of illness or just a scapegoat. After all, the human mind likes to assign blame. And when you've been doubled over for a day and a half, teeth chattering, and your last meal looked like it was scraped off the hull, well, cheese makes a handy villain. Especially when it stares back at you from the shelf like it knows. One particularly infamous voyage, the St. Margaret out of Liverpool, 1741, recorded 22 separate cases of violent gut collapse within the first month. Captain's log says, the cheese hath turned upon us. Rations suspended. It doesn't clarify what turned means. You assume it's not a metaphor. You, too, have your own moment of reckoning. It starts as a gentle unease, a tickle behind your ribs. You blame the weather, or maybe the weevils, but then your stomach clenches like it's bracing for a bar fight. You lie down, hoping for peace. Instead, your intestines begin singing sea shanties in Morse code. Soon you're sweating, pale, contemplating the barrel near your hammock in case things go downhill fast. You think back to the last bite of cheese. It had a certain tang. A sharpness that didn't feel natural. And it lingered, long after swallowing. Not flavor, more like memory. The kind that follows you into your dreams and leaves you questioning your decisions. You remember someone once joked, if it stings going down, it's doing its job. That man has not been seen since Gibraltar. You drag yourself to the upper deck for air, one hand clutching your side. The wind helps, the horizon helps, but the cheese remains, anchored in your core. You vow, again, not to eat tomorrow's portion. And like everyone else on this ship, you'll forget that vow the second you feel hunger pangs again. Because that's the other cruelty, there's never enough. Even if the food makes you sick, the lack of food feels worse. And so you eat, slowly, cautiously, with the same energy one uses to open a suspicious package or pet a strange dog. Then there's the truly disturbing trend. Some sailors begin craving the cheese. Not out of enjoyment, but compulsion. They grow used to it. Develop strategies, slice it thin, toast it if possible, soak it in rum, anything to make it pass without protest. One man said he had dreams where the cheese called to him. He later tried to marry a goat during shore leave. So, draw your own conclusions. Others insist that the worse the cheese tastes, the better the body adapts. Makes your gut harder, they say, like some kind of fermented fitness plan. One veteran swore he hadn't had solid bowels in 15 years, and credited it all to his ship's cheese. You don't know whether to be horrified or impressed. Eventually, the stomach aches pass, if you're lucky. If not, you might be laid up for days. Spoon-fed hard biscuit softened in tea, while the quartermaster pokes through the cheese barrel muttering about contamination zones. But the fear remains. Every bite is a gamble. Every meal a moment of prayer. And the worst part? You never know what did it. Was it the mold? The salt? The rat that may or may not have licked it last week? You just eat, endure, and float forward. Because out here, on this sea that never sleeps, with a horizon that never arrives, even bad cheese is better than none at all. Captain's cheese or crew's doom? You see the captain's cheese once, just once, and it haunts you. It's passed quietly from the steward to the captain's quarters on a silver plate. Like it's royalty. Or worse, a sacred relic. You're not supposed to be there. You were fetching something, ropes, maybe, or oil, and you caught a glimpse. Not moldy, not gray, not brick hard. This cheese gleamed, a pale ivory wedge with delicate veins of blue marbling, glistening with just the right hint of moisture. Like it had never even heard of a rat. You lock eyes with it. It doesn't squeak. It doesn't ooze. It merely exists, calmly, like it knows its place in the social order, and that its place is nowhere near you. Because you, dear sailor, eat cheese meant for punishment, for penance, for slowly sandpapering away the insides of your mouth while reminding you that dignity is a land-based luxury. Your cheese comes in cracked wedges. His arrives in perfect triangles. Yours arrives with a smell. His arrives with a bouquet. You return to your duties, eyes stinging with something you won't call envy. But the image stays, like a mirage, like someone once whispered, there's another world, just a few steps above you. And it smells like brie. It isn't just indulgence. On these ships, food equals power. The captain's cheese isn't just cheese, it's a symbol. An edible crown. A daily reminder that, on this wooden prison where rats outrank you in living standards, hierarchy survives in every bite. It's not the same for the crew. You get the leftovers, the overstock, the bricks that didn't sell in port, barrels rejected by merchants, blocks traded for discount rum. Sometimes, if the quartermaster is in a good mood, he'll try to scrape off the worst. Most times, he just nods toward the heap and says, "That's today's. And God help you if the ship's running low." Then they ration the rations. Slice them thinner than your patience. You stare down at a piece no bigger than a matchbox. And think, this used to be a cow. This is what remains. The real insult? The captain doesn't even eat his every day. Some days, you see his steward toss half of it overboard. Just a flash of ivory slipping into the sea. While you're below deck trying to decide if yours has developed a second rind. Historians still argue whether this food gap was strictly enforced by rank or more fluid depending on supplies. Some say captains shared provisions when morale dropped too low. Others insist the divide was absolute. What's clear is that the perception of unfairness was very real. Sailors believed their officers dined better, and sometimes, that was enough to make it true. You recall one night when tensions broke. Rain hammered the deck. turning ropes slick and tempers shorter. Below, a sailor named Tim's, long arms, cracked voice, always twitching, snapped. He'd just gotten a ration so foul it made the moldy biscuit look gourmet. Word had spread that the captain had a stash of port wine and fresh cheese brought aboard in the last port. Tim's marched toward the quarterdeck, teeth bared, hands shaking. He didn't make it far. The bosun intercepted him with a rope and a growl. The next morning, Tim's had cheese, but only because the steward dropped a piece near his hammock by accident. It was clean. It was soft. It tasted like regret. Rumor says it came from the captain's drawer. Some say guilt moved the hand. Others say it was bait, to see who would try to steal more. No one ever did. Cheese, you see, is dangerous in its own way. It inspires hope, and hope gets you killed faster than saltwater. You remember asking an older sailor, grizzled, mostly teeth, more wrinkle than man, why the officers get the good stuff. He said, they need the strength to make hard decisions. You asked, and we don't? He laughed for a long time. Then there's the strange ritual around officer waste. When their cheese goes off, not just a little ripe, but treasonous, it gets burned. Not dumped, not fed to pigs. Burned, as if to prevent it from infecting the air, or spreading dreams of dairy-based equality. The smell of burning cheese drifts below deck like an insult. One sailor once said it smelled like justice. Another said it smelled like lies. And then, of course, there's the fake cheese. Yes, occasionally, if the quartermaster's desperate, he'll mix chalk, flour, and old oil to simulate a fresh batch. It's rare, it's dangerous, it's immediately noticeable. One bite and you know. This is a betrayal. Not a meal, but no one says anything. Because hunger makes you complicit. You chew, and you move on. You think back to that gleaming wedge you saw, briefly, brightly, in the captain's cabin. It had a silver knife next to it. A napkin. It looked like a meal. Yours never looks like a meal. It looks like a test. But there's a secret comfort in this. Down here, below deck, you've earned your scars. Your teeth have chipped against something ancient. Your gut has survived tremors the captain's never known. You've eaten the worst this ship can throw at you, and come out the other side. And one day, when you're on land again, and someone offers you cheese on a little toothpick at a party, you'll nod politely, you'll smile, but you'll remember the difference between their cheese and yours. The smell that walked. There's a moment, always, that comes when you wake up in your hammock, mid-sail, and realize something new has entered the air. It doesn't knock, it doesn't slither, it simply arrives, like fog on a swamp or regret after shore leave. It's sharp, oily, strangely sweet, and utterly foul. You don't smell it so much as it moves into your nose, taps the inside of your skull with a damp sock, and settles in. Cheese, but not just any cheese. This one has reached what sailors call critical aroma, the point at which it no longer qualifies as food. It's now a being. It has a range. It travels through the deck, wafting like a ghost with a grudge. Some say it walks. You're beginning to believe them. You try to trace it. Was it in the galley? The hold? Did someone drop a wedge behind a barrel again? But the thing about this smell is, it doesn't stay. It moves, shifts, finds you even when you try to escape. One sailor once tied a strip of cloth soaked in rum around his nose. Didn't help, just made the cheese smell drunk and louder. Some say it's the heat. Others blame the moisture. But those who've been at sea long enough know, it's not the climate. It's the age. Once a cheese on board passes a certain threshold, and no one knows exactly when that is, it changes. It sweats without being touched. It darkens in corners. And worst of all, it seeps. You find a wedge abandoned by someone braver or dumber than you. It's half wrapped in a stained cloth, tucked behind the water cask. The scent is worse up close. It's like onions left in the sun, mixed with damp hay and a kind of foot-based revenge. You poke it with a spoon. It shivers. You drop the spoon. You look around. No one else seems alarmed. That's the part that unnerves you most. The crew is used to this. You, not yet. You're still adjusting to a world where cheese comes with a radius. Historians still argue whether this intense stench came from microbial activity, ammonia from protein breakdown, or simply centuries of poor storage habits. Regardless, the effect on morale was consistent. One strong wedge could ruin the sleeping quarters for days. There's a record of a Royal Navy ship diverting course, slightly, to dump a barrel overboard after a particularly sentient wheel ruptured in the heat. It was said to have made a sound when it split. Not a crack, a groan. You're assigned to sweep near the barrels that day. You do so with a rag across your face and the solemn resignation of someone who knows this isn't about cleanliness, it's containment. Because no matter what you do, no matter how tightly the barrels are packed, the smell finds a way. Like water. Or guilt. At night, it's worse. With the hatches closed and the lanterns dimmed, the air goes still. The stench hangs there. One man wakes up mid-dream and yells, "She's back." Then he laughs. Then he sobs. No one asks questions. You all know what she is. The crew has rituals now. The cheese shuffle happens just before nightfall, moving the worst barrels further aft, closer to the livestock pens or the heads. It doesn't help. The smell, like a seasoned sailor, knows its way around a deck. You once saw the cheese drip. It had grown so soft, on its own, without heat, that it left a residue on the plank. A pale yellow slick, sticky and musky, like something that never should have existed outside a fever dream. You mopped it up. The mop died. You lit it on fire. The cook pretends not to notice. He has a phrase for it, extra flavor. He'll wave off the complaints. It's aged. You should be grateful. That's complexity you're tasting. You're pretty sure you're tasting old rope and cruelty. Then one day, someone tries to fight the smell. It's Jenkins, the bosun's mate, big hands, small brain, and a temper as consistent as sunrise. He hauls out a barrel he swears is the source, drags it above deck, past the chickens, past the grumbling crew, all the way to the edge. He means to throw it overboard. He almost makes it, but the captain stops him, orders the cheese saved. We're still 6 days from port. He says, we don't waste provisions. The crew goes silent. No one dares argue. The barrel stays. So does the smell. For the next 2 nights, people sleep with cloths over their faces. Some use old breeches. One man dips his in vinegar. Claims it shocks the sinuses into forgetting. You try not to breathe. You fail. Eventually, the ship rolls into cooler winds. The air shifts. The smell retreats, curling into its lair like a beast satisfied. Temporarily. But you know it's waiting. You whisper to your bunkmate, "Can you still smell it?" He doesn't respond, just stares up at the beams. Eyes wide, rocking slightly. You realize he's humming. A lullaby. The kind people sing when they're trying not to cry. From that day forward, you understand. This cheese is not a foodstuff. It's a trial. A challenge the sea throws at you when storms don't kill you fast enough. It clings. It infiltrates your dreams. It waits beneath your cot. It teaches you to fear your own rations. And every now and then, when you close your eyes and think you've escaped, it returns, softly, smugly, like a memory you can't forget. Cheese-fueled mutinies, yes. Really. It starts with silence. That's how you always know something's wrong aboard a ship like this. Not the loud kind of wrong, no shouting. No storm. No swinging fists. Just an eerie hush. Footsteps go soft. Eyes lower. Voices disappear under hammocks. The kind of stillness that means something is brewing. And on this voyage, what's brewing isn't just rum or resentment, it's rebellion. And at the center of it all? Cheese. You think it's a joke at first. A mutiny? Over cheese? But as you lean in during the hush-hush whispers, it all starts to make twisted sense. Rations have turned, not just bad, but suspiciously bad. The cheese you were given this week is older than any you've had before. It flakes like dry bark. It smells like wet copper. It leaves a burning sensation on your tongue. And you're not alone. Half the lower deck has complained of cramps. The other half of nosebleeds. And one man, Hollis, says he saw a worm blink at him from the rind. And yet, up top, the officers still eat fresh stores. Better bread, softer cheese. Rumor has it they just opened a new wheel yesterday. Pale and soft. Imported from Lisbon. 2 men say they smelled it. One says he dreamed it. That was enough. Soon after, The plan is whispered into your ear like a secret love letter. We rush the galley during third watch. Someone says, "Take the stores. Open the captain's lockbox. Show the crew what they've been hiding." Another nods. "We don't hurt no one. Just redistribute. Just even the scale." It's not the first time cheese has incited rage. Historical logs tell of a Dutch East India ship in 1722 where the crew went 3 weeks with rotted cheese and nothing else. Mutiny followed, not because they wanted gold, but because they wanted to stop vomiting. And now it's happening again. But it's not about hunger, not really. It's about dignity. It's about watching men you swab decks beside eat things that make them ill. While higher-ups live like floating nobility, the officers don't care that your rations bubble, or that last Tuesday's cheese actually melted, not from heat, but from internal shame. They don't care. They're eating slices you could put on crackers, while yours might put you in the infirmary. You start to believe the whispers. You start to see the logic. There's anger in your gut, half fermented by the food, half by fury. You see hands tighten into fists when the cheese is passed out. You see eyes linger on the officers' quarters longer. And still, the quartermaster shrugs. "That's what's left," he says. "You want better? Join the Navy." That night, it begins. Not with a bang, not with a shout, just a single knife placed quietly into a belt. A nod, a wink, a sudden absence from the mess queue. You're below deck when the noise starts, boots on wood, the scrape of something metallic. Then shouting. Not words, just a release of pressure that had been building for weeks. The cook screams. A barrel tips. Cheese hits the floor like a spilled secret. There's laughter. There's smashing. For one glorious moment, it seems like the plan might work. But the captain was ready. Maybe he'd heard the whispers. Maybe he smelled the rot in the morale. Either way, the Marines are already in place. Muskets primed. Boots firm. Expressions bored. They've seen this before. A few warning shots are all it takes to clear the galley. Men flee. One slips on curdled dairy and yells all the way down the companionway. The smell of burning cheese fills the air. You duck into the shadows. Heart pounding. A chunk of stolen ration in your hand. It's better than anything you've had in weeks. Creamy. Smooth. Almost floral. And in that moment, with bootsteps crashing overhead and someone sobbing into a mop, you understand why they risked it. Historians still debate the frequency of food-fueled mutinies. Some claim they were rare, exaggerated by logbooks trying to justify harsh punishments. Others argue that food, more than flogging or weather, was the true powder keg. A spoiled barrel of cheese was just as dangerous as a crooked captain. Because while hunger gnaws at the body, unfairness eats the soul. In the days that follow, punishments are handed down, nothing fatal. Just lashings, reduced water rations. One man is forced to sleep near the goat for a week. You get lucky. They never find the cheese in your pouch. The officer rations are sealed tighter. Guarded. The cook's smile disappears. The galley now smells of vinegar and fear. But something's shifted. The captain now eats in private. No more cheese on display. The quartermaster now inspects every wheel before distribution, though what he's inspecting for, no one really knows. The mood aboard is quieter. Not better. Just simmering. You keep that last piece of good cheese for a week. You don't eat it. You just carry it, in a wrap of linen, tucked into your coat like a keepsake. Some days, you take it out and smell it. Not because it's comforting, but because it reminds you that fairness is a choice. And on the sea, it's rarely made. When it finally goes bad, you bury it near the ballast. Not for hygiene. For respect. Cheese started a mutiny. Cheese ended it. And next week, when the rations arrive and your portion is a slab of the same old salted cement, you'll chew it without comment. But deep down, you'll remember the taste of rebellion. Rat raid rivalries and the cheese wars. It starts as a faint scratching. You freeze mid-step in the dark of the lower hold. Ears tilted toward the sound. There it is again, soft, frantic, rhythmic. Somewhere behind the sacks of barley and the barrel of regrettable plums. Then silence. Then a scrabble. You're not alone down here. You light a stub of candle and squint. Two small eyes glint back at you from the shadows. Rats. They own this ship. Everyone knows it. You're just a temporary guest in their floating kingdom of chewable wood and midnight crumbs. And what they always want, is the cheese. But not just any cheese. They're picky. Surprisingly so. They go for the freshest moldy chunks. The softer wedges. The newer barrels not yet opened for crew rations. They've figured it out. And now you, poor unfortunate sailor, have been pulled into a secret war already long underway. The rats aren't just pests. They're opponents. And this is not a random skirmish, it's cheese warfare. You find the evidence the next morning. A quarter wedge gone missing. Tiny bite marks. A trail of crumbs leading to a beam above the galley. The cook swears he counted correctly. The quartermaster swears he sealed the barrel tight. Someone must have stolen it. Someone with whiskers. And just like that, the crew begins to split into factions. There are the cheese guardians, who start hoarding their portions in tin boxes wrapped in oilcloth, hanging them from beams or burying them under their hammocks. Then there are the cheese baiters, who try to trap the rats by offering tainted wedges, old cheese gone near feral with ammonia and decay. Let him eat that, says Grafton, grinning over a chunk that smells like vinegar-soaked despair. But it doesn't work. The rats are too smart, too coordinated. They move in small teams, nibble through rope, and carry away slices heavier than themselves. One sailor swears he saw a rat dragging an entire rind across the deck like a battle flag. Soon, it escalates. The rats get bolder. They start raiding while sailors sleep. One man wakes to find a rat chewing inside his jacket. Another wakes up with his cheese missing and a neat little turd left in its place. Clear insult. The cook begins hanging the rations from hooks in the galley. A good idea. Until the rats figure out how to climb the walls. You walk in one night and see a line of them, like a military column, scaling the pantry. They scatter when you shout. But they look back, like they'll remember this. And you know they will. Historians still argue just how much of shipboard food loss was due to rats. Some say up to 20% of provisions vanished thanks to rodent raids. Others claim this was exaggerated by lazy quartermasters and corrupt cooks. But one thing's certain, cheese was a primary target. High in fat, rich in calories, and often easier to chew than rock-hard biscuit. It was the rats' version of fine dining. You start sleeping with your ration under your shirt. Warm, yes. Damp, unfortunately. But it's better than losing it. You even build a small hammock for it, strung between two beams like a cradle of suffering. One sailor names his wedge, Mildred, and sings to it before bed. You try not to make eye contact. Then, one night, it happens. A raid, not small, not stealthy, a full assault. You wake to squealing, shouting, the clatter of boots. Someone lights a lantern, and suddenly the whole lower deck is a battlefield. Rats pouring from a split sack of oats. Sailors waving spoons, shoes, even swords. Someone throws a bucket. You think someone else starts praying. You swing your hammock down just in time to catch one dragging your cheese toward a crack in the floorboards. You yell. You lunge. You win. Barely. The rat glares at you before disappearing into the dark. You lie there panting, sweaty, victorious. Mildred is safe. After that night, the captain calls for action. The rat catchers, usually boys with quick hands and no fear, are armed with knives and buckets. A bounty is placed, 1/2 dram of rum per rat tail. Morale soars. A new economy blooms. But the rats evolve. They get smarter. They avoid traps. They learn the schedules. One even manages to sneak into the officer's pantry. That wedge of imported French cheese? Gone in a night. All that remains is a smear and a tiny paw print on a silver tray. For one glorious, bizarre week, the officers join the war. Cheese becomes the great equalizer. Everyone's food is at risk. Everyone's dignity is on the line. And then, as quickly as it began, it ends. The rats retreat. Maybe because the ship nears port. Maybe because they've eaten their fill. Maybe, just maybe, they've won. Because the crew? They're exhausted. Tired of sleeping with cheese in their boots. Tired of waking to squeaks. Tired of seeing their rations vanish like dreams. You sigh and sit with your daily wedge. The war is over. For now. But you feel the tension. The awareness. Cheese is no longer just food. It's a territory. It must be defended. It must be honored. So you eat carefully, quietly, eyes on the shadows. Because you know they're still out there. Watching, waiting, planning their next move. The worm that broke the mariner. You've seen many things aboard this ship. You've endured foul storms, foul food, and even fouler bunkmates. But nothing, not a single misfortune at sea, prepares you for the first time you cut into your cheese, and it moves. At first, you think it's your imagination. Maybe your eyes are tired. Maybe it's just a trick of the lantern light. You lean in, you squint, you cut again, and this time, you see it, a wiggle, a twitch, a little white worm curling from a split in the rind, blinking into the world like it, too, is horrified to be here. You drop your knife. Around you, no one screams, no one gasps, no one even flinches, because this, it turns out, is normal. This, dear sailor, is part of the experience. They're called cheese hoppers, not in a cute way, not in a collect them all kind of way. These are larvae, tiny squirming reminders that your cheese is not alone, and that it is, biologically speaking, still alive. Some even jump. That's right, jumping worms, with tiny legs. In your food, one older sailor leans over, grinning through 5 teeth and a lifetime of bad choices. That's the good stuff, lad, he says, means it's matured proper. You blink, you question everything. It turns out, on some ships, cheese with worms is seen not just as tolerable, but desirable, a sign of age, of richness, of a healthy ferment. Some sailors claim it's better on the gut, warms the belly, fights the salt. Others say it's just a source of protein. You say it's a curse. Historians still argue whether the presence of maggots was considered a true culinary trait or simply a grotesque byproduct of poor storage. Some regional cheeses, like Italy's notorious casu marzu, are intentionally fermented with larvae. But here, on the open ocean, it's not about flavor. It's about necessity. You either eat the worm, or you eat nothing at all. You try to cut around it. Surgical precision. A flick here, a slice there. But the worms are everywhere. Embedded in the edges. Nested in little tunnels. One wriggles across your blade. You swear you hear it hiss. It probably doesn't. Probably. You look to the man beside you. He's already halfway through his wedge. Not even chewing carefully. You watch a worm disappear between his teeth. He doesn't blink, just wipes his mouth and says, "Crunchy today." You consider your options. Chew, gag, or fast. There's a fourth option, but it requires resolve. Roasting. You find an excuse to linger in the galley. Wedge in hand, over a small cooking flame. You hold your chunk at arm's length. A little heat won't hurt, right? You turn it slowly, watching as the surface browns and crisps, and, to your horror, as tiny shapes wriggle free and fall onto the fire, sizzling like sausages from a hell you didn't know existed. One pops. You look away. You still eat it. It's hot now, and the worms are, hopefully, dead. It tastes edible. You chew. You survive. You feel something twist in your gut. But maybe it's just shame. Then there are those who go the other way. The raw wormers, as you secretly call them. They like it, say it adds a tang. One sailor, Bellamy, starts collecting the worms. Keeps a jar. Claims he's starting a new recipe. You give him space. One time, the captain is served a slice with a worm still visible. The steward almost faints. The captain just raises an eyebrow. Picks it out, flicks it onto the floor, and keeps eating. No drama. Just cold, seasoned indifference. That's leadership, you suppose. Soon after, the quartermaster implements a rule. All cheese is to be shaken and sliced before distribution. It does nothing. The worms are too fast. Too clever. One even leaps from a wedge and lands in someone's beard. A scream follows. You understand. Some sailors believe the worms are omens. If it wiggles right, they say, we make port safe. Others think it's the opposite. Jumping worm? Storm inbound. You can't tell who believes what. But it's clear these creatures have become more than pests. They're part of the lore. Part of the ship's strange mythology. You begin having dreams. The cheese grows eyes. The worms crawl into your ears. You wake up mid-shout. palm pressed to your cheek, swearing you felt something move. Your bunkmate sighs and turns over. It's just the hunger, he says. It does that. One day, a fresh barrel is opened. No worms. Smooth rind. Clean scent. The cook announces it like a miracle. Cheers echo down the hall. Men queue up with bowls. You take a slice. Hands trembling. You bite. It's soft. Pure. Dead. You've never been so relieved to eat something tasteless. But you can't forget. Not really. The memory of the worm remains. You hesitate before each bite now. You inspect shadows. You chew slowly, waiting for the squish. Sometimes you feel it, even when it's not there. Because that's the thing. The worms are gone, but they've already won. Cursed cargo and the port cheese myths. You step off the ship at a port so old it seems to be sinking under the weight of its own ghosts. The cobblestones reek of salt and something sweeter, like fermenting figs. The locals watch you disembark with an expression you can only describe as amused pity. They've seen sailors like you before. Gaunt, pale, eyes darting as if haunted by something that lives beneath the deck. You need a drink, maybe two, but before that, you're given orders. Help restock supplies. That means cheese. You head toward the market with a few other crewmen. The quartermaster leading the way like a man resigned to disappointment. Port cheese, as it's known on the ship, comes with a reputation. Not just bad, not just cheap, but cursed. Superstitions swirl around certain wheels and wedges like flies. Never buy cheese that's been exposed to moonlight. If the vendor's left eye twitches, don't take the wedge. Smell it twice, but never 3 times. You laugh the first time you hear these. The locals don't. A vendor holds up a pale wheel, wrapped in wax and worn linen. He doesn't speak, just points to it. You reach out. The quartermaster slaps your hand away. That one's marked. He mutters. You lean in. Sure enough, a small X carved into the rind. What's that mean? Death cheese. You blink. Excuse me? He nods. One of the ships that took from that batch never returned. Bad storms. Worse luck. All hands gone. Same thing happened to a Spanish crew last year. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't have to. You step back. Historians still argue whether these myths were born of coincidence or survival instinct. Some believe these marked cheeses were simply old, infected with mold that produced hallucinations or illness. Others suspect sailors, desperate for explanations in a dangerous world, blamed cheese because it was there. And weird things happened when they ate it. You carry back 2 wheels yourself. One small and firm, the other unusually soft for sea cheese. As you lift it, you notice a faint crack along the edge. It leaks slightly. A sour-smelling oil trails down your sleeve. You ask if it's normal. The vendor says nothing, just watches. That night, in the hold, the crew unpacks the new haul. The soft wheel is placed near the front, easier access. No one touches it, not at first, but hunger is stronger than folklore. A man named Dawes slices it open 2 days later. The smell hits like a punch. Strong, yes, but not rotten. More, floral, sweet. It spreads quickly. Everyone smells it. Even the captain comments on it. That's new, he mutters. Dawes eats it. He likes it. Says it reminds him of something from his childhood. A market in Devon, maybe. He finishes the slice. Then another. By nightfall, he's quiet. Too quiet. He stares at his boots. Doesn't blink. Doesn't sleep. By morning, he's gone. Not dead. Not overboard. Just gone. His hammock's empty. His boots left behind. No one saw him leave. No one heard him move. One sailor swears he saw Dawes at the bow around midnight, standing perfectly still, holding a sliver of cheese and whispering into the waves. The soft wheel is sealed again. No one speaks of it. Another myth among port cheeses? Some say certain wheels carry memories. Open them, and you'll dream someone else's life. A different ship, a different time. Maybe that's what happened to Dawes. Maybe he found someone else's ending. You begin noticing odd behaviors after port cheese is introduced. Dreams get strange. One sailor wakes screaming in Dutch. He's Irish. Another finds his hands covered in wax, though he swears he never left his cot. You try not to connect the dots. You fail. Eventually, the cursed cheese is thrown overboard. It doesn't sink immediately. It floats, bobs gently beside the hull, spinning slowly. A sailor jokes that it's trying to come back aboard. No one laughs. The cook tries to assure everyone that the rest of the batch is fine. It's just cheese, he says, but even he won't eat the new wheels without lighting a candle first. You start noticing cheese being stored further from the sleeping quarters. Tied shut, double wrapped, blessed, sometimes, by the chaplain if he's had enough rum to believe in it. One night, you wake to find your wedge is gone. A replacement lies in its place. Slightly different color, different texture. You ask the quartermaster. He swears no swap happened. You don't eat it. Instead, you trade it for a pair of dry socks. The sailor who takes it later reports dreams of drowning. You say nothing. Port cheese myths spread like mold. Every port has its own. In Lisbon, don't cut it under a waning moon. In Barbados, if it sings, don't slice. In Malta, never take the cheese offered first. You start keeping track of the rules. Just in case. They sound ridiculous. Until they don't. Cheese is punishment. The iron ration. The punishment is simple. No rum. No fresh water for a day. And, most dreaded of all, a double portion of ship's cheese. You've seen it do worse than the lash. Sailors who've survived storms and skirmishes tremble at the announcement. No one cheers when a man's sentenced to it. No one claps their bunkmate on the back with a hearty "Take it like a lad." They just glance down at their own rations, suddenly grateful they didn't sneeze during inspection. The iron ration, they call it, a name as heavy as the wedge itself. It's not a reward. It's a warning. You watch the first victim, Morrow, sit alone near the foredeck. The sun cooking the back of his neck while he stares down at his punishment. A hunk of cheese so dry it has visible ridges. So dense it makes a thudding sound when placed on wood. He picks at it with his spoon, which bends. He switches to his knife. The blade skips off the surface and nearly takes his thumb. This isn't food. This is a lesson. And it's one the officers enforce with solemn pride. Disrespect the code. Disrespect the cheese, says the bosun. It's a saying that makes no real sense but carries the full weight of naval tradition. Some ships even carve punishments directly onto the cheese wedge. A notch for each offense. A crude warning label, etched in dairy. Historians still argue whether this use of cheese as punishment was official doctrine or crew-born improvisation. Some logs mention it explicitly, 4 hours in stocks. 2 rations of cured cheese. Others make no note, as if the horror was too unspeakable for the written record. You hear whispers that the worst pieces are saved for this purpose. That there's a special barrel set aside, the discipline wheel. One so old and unloved that even rats avoid it. No one has opened it in months. The quartermaster swears it's there. He once tapped the lid and said, "Still ticking." You don't ask what that means. When it's your turn, because everyone has a turn eventually, it comes without ceremony. You stood too long on watch. You spilled lamp oil near the rope coil. Minor things, not worth flogging, but just enough to remind you where you stand. You're handed the wedge. It looks like it was once part of a wall. Cold, gray, with flecks of something that might have once been color. You put it in your lap. You look at it. It looks back. The smell is faint, but wrong, like dust mixed with vinegar. Like an old room that hasn't seen laughter in years. You try to bite it. Your jaw aches before you even get a corner loose. You chew for what feels like an hour. Lips numb, tongue resigned. The flavor is what you imagine regret would taste like if it were carved from limestone and left in the bilge. A sailor passes by, sees your struggle, and offers a canteen. Wash it down, he says, but you're not allowed water today. Only the cheese. That's the point. The suffering is the seasoning. Eventually, you manage to swallow. You don't remember the taste. Only the sensation of surrender. And the ache in your teeth. Some men get philosophical about it. Cheese punishment is good for the soul, says one. It scrubs the pride out of you. Another claims it brings visions. That if you chew long enough, without drink or mercy, you start seeing shapes in the deck planks. You believe him, a little too much. There's one tale, half joke, half threat, about a man sentenced to 7 straight days of cheese. He snapped on day 5. Didn't jump overboard, Didn't scream, just left, walked into the galley, placed his wedge on the stove, and walked straight out the back hatch. Into the sea, his name scratched into the mast. A warning and a memorial. The officers insist it's fair, that it builds character. Better than the lash. One says, maybe, maybe not. A welt heals. A cracked molar doesn't. And a man can grow to fear a wedge of cheese more than a whip. You begin to notice how the ship changes when the punishment cheese comes out. Laughter quiets. Meals are taken faster. Eyes cast downward. The smell carries across the deck like a fog. Everyone knows someone's in trouble. Everyone knows not to ask why. But it also unites the crew. A strange solidarity forms. A man given the wedge is often left small gifts. A soft biscuit crust. A clean rag. A wink of sympathy. Because everyone has tasted it. And everyone knows it lingers, not in the mouth, but in the memory. You don't forget your slice. Not ever. You carry it with you. Long after it's gone, it reappears in dreams. In moments of silence, you find yourself touching your teeth, as if to check they survived the ordeal. And when you hear another sailor getting the sentence, you don't laugh, you don't tease, you just nod, silently, respectfully. Because you've been there, you've tasted the iron, and you pray you never do again. Disease by dairy. From botulism to belly fever. The body can endure a lot. Salt wind, rotten water, a hammock that swings like it's out to get you. But your stomach? Your stomach keeps a grudge. And on a ship where cheese has been aging since before your captain learned to shave. It's your gut that takes the brunt of the war. The signs start slow. A rumble in the night. A twisting after your ration. Then a fever that creeps like fog, damp, slow, and cruel. The medics call it belly fever. You call it Tuesday. There's no shortage of theories on what causes it. The cook swears it's the hardtack. The quartermaster blames poor ventilation. But you know the truth. You saw the green bloom on your wedge. You tasted the bitterness, that telltale sting behind your tongue. And now you lie in your hammock, drenched in sweat, clutching your gut and wondering whether you'll live long enough to regret your choices. You're not alone. 2 other men are down. One weeps softly. Another mutters nonsense in French. He's from Portsmouth. The ship's medic arrives. He pokes your side. You flinch. Spoiled ration. He mutters. Again. He doesn't sound surprised. Just tired. He gives you a few drops of laudanum, which helps with the pain but not the truth. The truth is, this cheese could kill you. And not just in the vague, miserable, I might throw up my soul kind of way. No, real, lethal risks. Botulism, listeria, things you've only heard whispered in dockside taverns by men with too few teeth and too many stories. Historians still argue whether botulism was common aboard ships. Some claim it was a rare fluke, dependent on poor fermentation or airtight storage gone wrong. Others believe it was wildly underreported, misdiagnosed as fever, madness, or simply written off when a man died quietly in the night. After all, what captain wants to admit his cheese is staging a murder? You remember an old tale told by a grizzled steward. Cheese too soft? Watch it close. If it hisses when you slice it, toss it overboard. If it bubbles, toss yourself. You thought he was joking. Now, you're not so sure. The cook, when asked, shrugs. It's aged. That's the point. You want to ask, aged into what? But your stomach answers for you, with a noise like a chair breaking in a cellar. You spend 2 days on your back. Time becomes loose. Conversations blur. You're vaguely aware of the smell of tar, the distant creak of sails, and someone whimpering about a wheel of cheese that talks. Might have been you. Then, you get better. Slowly. The fever breaks. The stomach quiets. You're left hollowed out and weary. Your first meal back? Cheese. Of course it is. It always is. You inspect it like it's a crime scene. Smell it. Tap it. You even lick it once. Just to check. It tastes fine. Maybe. You eat it. But now you chew with suspicion. You eat like a man who doesn't trust his food, and for good reason. Not every illness knocks you flat. Some are subtler. The gut creep. The milk sweats. Digestive distress that lingers for weeks. Some men just adapt. Their eyes get dull. Their skin goes sallow. You start to think of them not as sick, But cheese touched the price of survival. And then there's the madness. Not the violent, knife-wielding kind, the drifting kind, a man who mumbles to his food, who sniffs each bite and whispers, "Not today," who arranges crumbs in patterns and calls them maps. They say too much bad cheese poisons not just the body, but the mind. One sailor, Jenks, swore his cheese spoke to him, said it whispered in his sleep, told him the future. He disappeared one night. Some think he jumped. Others believe he followed the cheese. You hope it's neither, but you move your own ration further from your pillow, just in case. To be fair, not all cheese aboard is deadly. Some is just unlucky. You bite into a wedge and lose a filling. You find a shard of wood. You wonder if someone's using the barrels for more than just storage. A rat once died inside a wheel. No one noticed until slicing day. You can guess how that story ends. The real danger is that you get used to it. You start brushing off symptoms. It's just the brine, you tell yourself, even as your hands shake. You excuse the dizziness as poor sleep. The bloating? Everyone's gassy. The hallucination of your cheese smiling at you? Probably the rum. Because to survive at sea, you learn to ignore pain, to laugh at danger, and to chew without asking too many questions. But deep down, you know, this cheese is not your friend. It's a wager, a dare, and each bite you take is you saying, "Let's see who breaks first." Historians still argue. Did cheese kill more than cannonballs? Let's talk numbers. Not the kind you track with a compass or chart with stars. No, these are quieter figures, the sort scratched hastily in ship logs, whispered between officers, or buried in letters home, dead of illness, dead of fever, dead of something nobody quite names, and always dead after cheese. You sit now beside a water barrel, slowly gnawing a slice that could double as a deck tile, and wonder just how many men have fallen to the same fate, expecting nutrition, receiving a death sentence sealed in wax. Historians still argue the truth. Did cheese kill more men than cannonballs? It sounds absurd, until you start adding up the clues. Battle was rare, illness was not. In a month-long voyage, you might never see conflict, but you would certainly see rot, diarrhea, fever, men collapsing with their belt buckles undone, whispering to their stomachs like priests to a dying parishioner. And while salt pork or bad water gets a share of the blame, it's the cheese that feels more deliberate, more personal, like it watched you, waited, planned. You remember Jenkins, not the loudest man, not the strongest, but the only one who kept a tally. A page torn from a ledger. Cheese-related illnesses. He wrote at the top. You thought it was a joke. Then he listed names, symptoms, the number of days since consumption. And the pattern began to emerge. He showed it to the quartermaster. The ledger disappeared the next morning. No one mentioned it again. Cheese is stealthy. It doesn't strike like a cannonball. It doesn't leave a scar. It seeps. It simmers. And in its wake, it leaves confusion. Did he fall ill because of the cheese? Or because of the lack of anything else? That ambiguity protected it. Protected the system that distributed it. There's a well-known naval statistic. During long voyages in the 18th century, the ratio of disease-related deaths to combat deaths could be as high as 10 to 1. In some expeditions, even higher. And while scurvy gets the headlines, and bad water gets the theories, cheese is left to slink quietly through history like a stinking, salted ghost. One ship's log from 1761 simply reads, 5 down. Suspect cheese. Nothing more. Another, more candid. Wedge opened. Moved of its own volition. Burns and retching followed. The captain struck it from the record 2 days later. But the sailors remember. The stories passed down. Quietly. Mockingly. Cheddar death. They call it. The slow cannonball. A bite at a time. A slip of health. A stomach war turned internal. You try to count in your head how many you've seen fall ill right after rations. You lose track around 12. Some got better. Some didn't. Some are still aboard, but different now. Hollowed. Haunted. One man sits alone during meals. Chewing without swallowing. You think he's bargaining with the wedge. There's even a superstition among some crews that the worst cheeses bear marks. Not visible ones. No mold. No rot. but energy. A dead taste. If your tongue tingles just before the swallow, spit it out. If it burns a little sweet, that's death's whisper. You scoff the first time you hear this. Then you taste it, and you don't laugh anymore. Even the officers, for all their privilege, sometimes fall victim. You remember a young lieutenant, fresh from port, eager to impress. He insisted on dining like the men, took a slab from the lower deck stores, bit into it proudly. He was sick within hours, delirious by morning, dead by sunset. They said it was the heat, the stress. You remember the look on the surgeon's face. You saw it again a month later, when someone else tried the same stunt. You look down at your own ration now. Same size, same shape, same smell. You bite because you have to, because it's what's given. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a tally begins. Another risk, another roll of the dice. You wonder if future historians will ever grasp it. The sheer weight of survival, not from war, not from storm, but from the slow, unrelenting battle against food that's supposed to keep you alive. They'll dig through old logs, argue over terms like flux and putrid fever, trying to pin down causes. They'll publish papers, attend conferences, debate whether this sickness or that one was cheese-borne. But you already know. You lived it. You watched the barrel open. You watched the wedge glisten like it had something to prove. You saw the moment when a sailor's jaw slowed mid-bite, and something behind his eyes shifted. Cheese may not wear a red coat or carry a musket, but it's taken more men than you can count. Quietly, slowly, efficiently. The rank cheese test of masculinity. There's an unspoken test aboard the ship. Not strength, not seamanship, not even skill with a blade. No, this is far more primal, more intimate. It's the cheese test, and you don't take it by choice, it finds you. It begins with a dare. You're sitting on a coil of rope, chewing through the usual rock-hard wedge, when someone sidles up beside you and drops a chunk into your lap. It's not just old, it's rank, sticky to the touch, veined with an unnatural blue that seems to shimmer under candlelight. And it smells, not just bad, existentially bad, the kind of smell that questions your right to be alive. The dare is simple. Eat it. There are no rules, no timer, just you, the cheese, and the eyes of the crew. Watching, waiting, measuring your reaction. This is what passes for entertainment at sea. You try to laugh it off. I'm not stupid, you say, but the older ones smile. Then you're not a sailor yet, either. Because here, on this floating nightmare of sweat and brine, eating cheese that wants to kill you is a right of manhood, of belonging, of sheer, bull-headed, teeth-gritting endurance. You know it's ridiculous. You also know you're not backing down. So you take the chunk. Hold it close. The smell punches you in the sinuses. You swear your eyebrows recoil. It's warm, too. That's the part that makes your skin crawl. Warm cheese on a cold sea is like a fever in a corpse, unnatural and foreboding. You bite, and instantly regret it. It's soft in the middle. Wet. There's a squish that shouldn't happen. The flavor is sour, sharp, somehow fishy. You gag. You swallow. The men cheer. You survive. For now. You spend the rest of the evening chasing the taste from your mouth. Bread, salt, even a sip of lamp oil. If it came to it. But it lingers, not just on your tongue, on your soul. This little ritual has variations. On some ships, it's a game. Each sailor draws from a cloth bag. One wedge inside is the rot. Draw it, and you bite it. No flinching, no spitting, just chew, chew, chew while your bunkmates howl with laughter. Other ships make it more ceremonial. One crew even gave it a name, the bite of Neptune. Sailors kneel on deck, cheese presented like an offering. Eat it clean, you're ocean-blooded. Fail, and your hammock gets moved closer to the bilge. Historians still argue whether these rituals were genuine traditions or desperate boredom. Some anthropologists suggest they were bonding exercises, shared suffering to build camaraderie. Others argue it was about hazing, breaking the new, teaching humility via dairy. You lean toward the latter. Because it isn't just the eating. It's the aftermath, the cramps, the suspicious glances, the whispered bets about when you'll vomit. This isn't nourishment. This is survival theater. You remember your first day aboard. You asked about chores, schedules, but no one told you about this. About how your worth would be measured not in knots tied or sails hauled, but by what your stomach could endure without shame. One man, Delver, failed, took one sniff and turned green. The crew never let him forget. Called him Milksop until the day he jumped ship in Jamaica. They say he took a job ashore where the cheese didn't sweat back. You try to avoid the game for a while. Keep your head down, but then your turn comes again. This time it's part of an initiation for a new watch rotation. Someone brings out a wedge that's been aging in a sock. It looks alive. You've seen less mold on dead trees. You hesitate. You consider claiming injury. But you know what that'll earn you. A reputation you don't want. So you square your shoulders. You take the bite. The crew watches closely, not just for gagging, but for something else. How you chew. Whether you wince. Whether your eyes water. Whether you mean it. Because the real test isn't about endurance. It's about control. Can you mask disgust? Can you play along? Can you make misery look like pride? You pass. Barely. Later. Alone. You're ill for hours. But no one sees. And that's what matters. The cheese test comes again and again. In different forms. A surprise swap in your ration. A blindfolded challenge. A bet over rum. Each time. The rules are the same. Eat without question. Digest without complaint. Smile. Even when your gut is writing its will. There's something primal about it. Ancient. Like cavemen daring each other to lick fire. You wonder if land-based folks do this too. Probably not. They have dignity. You, on the other hand, have cheese. You begin to build immunity. Or think you do. The smells don't bother you as much. The textures become familiar. You start naming flavors. Musty rope. Salted barnacle. Dead lemon. You joke with the others. But part of you knows it's not really immunity. It's defeat. It's acceptance that this is life now. And weirdly, that's a kind of strength. Cheddar's role in saltwater superstitions. You've heard a lot of nonsense at sea. Sailors can spin tales faster than they can hoist a sail. But there's one thing you've learned never to laugh at. Even when it sounds utterly absurd, superstitions. Especially when they involve cheese. It starts small. You notice Jenkins refusing to eat his ration if the moon is visible through the porthole. Cheese spoils under moonlight, he mutters. Takes on the sea's temper. You chuckle the first time. The next day, a storm hits. The worst you've seen in months. Jenkins points at you. Told you. Coincidence? Probably. But the stories start stacking up. Soon, you hear them all. Don't cut cheese on a Friday. Don't store it near the anchor chain. Never, ever eat from a wheel that's split on the starboard side. Cheese, it seems, is a portal, not to nutrition, but to fate. And sailors, desperate for any sense of control, begin treating it like a sacred, unpredictable talisman. You find wedges marked with symbols, crosses, stars, crude runes, not for decoration, for protection. The idea is simple. Cheese carries energy. It's been aged, fermented, weathered. It remembers. If mistreated, it can curse a voyage. If honored, it might shield you from the worst. One sailor insists that wrapping your wedge in oilcloth soaked in rum keeps the bad spirits away. Another places his daily portion under his pillow, claiming it absorbs nightmares. You try it once. Your dreams are strange, full of foghorns and floating cows. The strangest superstition? The singing cheese. You don't believe it until you hear it yourself. Middle of the night, ship dead quiet, a faint hum from the storage barrels. You investigate. Nothing. The next morning, a barrel has cracked. The cheese inside? Spoiled, wet, unearthly in color. The cook tosses it into the sea without hesitation. Heard it too, he says. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphor, mold-induced madness, or simply ways to make sense of rotting rations. Some say the ammonia from decaying dairy can cause hallucinations. Others believe that in the isolation of sea life, your mind finds ghosts wherever it can. You don't know what to believe anymore. There's the tale of the Blue Storm. A wheel of Roquefort brought aboard in Gibraltar. That night, lightning struck the mainmast. No warning, no build-up, just a blinding crack and sudden chaos. The ship rocked for hours. The cheese was thrown overboard the next day. The storm stopped within the hour. Coincidence? No one questions it. Another time, you watch a new deckhand laugh at the rituals. He mocks Jenkins, tears the oilcloth from someone's ration, and takes a bite of a forbidden slice, a wedge from the silent barrel. Never meant to be opened at sea. He breaks out in hives. Not fatal, just grotesque. Swollen face, burning skin. He's confined to the sick bay for 4 days. When he returns, he doesn't mock anymore. In fact, he starts mumbling to his cheese before each meal. Thanks it, apologizes to it. You follow suit. Because even if it's all nonsense, what if it's not? You begin to notice signs. A sour-smelling wheel before a fight breaks out. A cracked rind before the wind dies. The presence of flies around a fresh wedge is considered especially bad, flies of the drowned. Someone whispers. Then there's the parrot. Belonged to the captain. Bright, loud, smarter than half the crew. It sat on his shoulder during inspections. One day, it vanishes. The next, a cheese barrel topples on its own. No storm, no shaking, just falls. Inside, mold like cobwebs, soft and collapsing. That night, the parrot returns. Dead, floating in the bilge. No one speaks during breakfast. Even the cook starts practicing cheese lore now. Wears gloves, lights a candle before opening a new barrel. Hums a sea hymn under his breath as he slices. You ask him why. He shrugs. Better safe than sunk. And just like that, your daily ration isn't just something to eat. It's something to watch, to weigh, to respect. You begin to look for omens. Green spots in the center? Bad weather. White bloom near the edges? Good luck. If your wedge cracks in 3 even parts, it's a sign someone's thinking of you back home. You know it's all nonsense. But you can't help believing a little. One morning, you receive a wedge that smells oddly fresh. Too fresh. The scent of herbs. Even. You pause. A sailor leans in. A blessing. He says, "That wheel's from land. Last port. Untouched." You nod. You eat it. That day, nothing goes wrong. No leaks. No arguments. The sails catch just right. You sleep without dreams. Coincidence? Maybe. But the next morning, when your cheese smells off again, you hesitate. You touch it to your lips. You whisper, "Don't curse me today." You chew slowly, respectfully, and hope the sea is listening. Cheese in class. Galley inequality. You always knew life at sea wasn't fair. The officers sleep above the stench. They get real plates, real forks, sometimes even napkins. But it isn't until you see the cheese that the truth of the gap really slaps you in the face, harder than the bosun ever could. Your ration today is the usual, crusty, dry, and tinged with a shade of gray you didn't know food could manage. You've started calling it whalebone. Everyone just accepts it. Chew slowly, swallow carefully, hope you don't crack a molar. But then you glimpse the steward. He's walking, no, gliding, across the quarterdeck with a tray. On it, a slice of cheese so golden and soft it nearly glows. No mold, no cracks, a creamy bloom of rind. You blink, you stare, you consider tackling him, but instead, you just watch as he delivers it to the captain. And you realize, there are 2 kinds of cheese aboard this ship. Yours, and theirs. You've long suspected the officers had better stores. Now you know. There's a whisper that their cheese is land-kept, brought aboard from private merchants. Wrapped in oilcloth and blessings. Hidden in their personal lockers. One man, Wells, once snuck into the office's galley during night watch. Came back shaking. Said he saw a wheel of untouched cheddar. Still soft. Still fragrant. They had a cheese knife with a wooden handle. A board to slice on. The same man was found asleep in the rope locker the next morning, muttering about paradise lost. Historians still argue how deeply food inequality ran on naval ships. Some claim officers shared when stores were tight. Others suggest a strict line was drawn and guarded with military precision. From what you've seen, you believe the latter, not out of cruelty, perhaps, but out of habit. Tradition, entitlement passed down like a spyglass. The officers don't eat in front of you. Not exactly, but you know when it happens. The smells drift down, rich, nutty, alive. Your cheese doesn't have a smell anymore. It has an odor, a warning sign. One day, you get bold. You ask the cook, why can't we have what they have? He doesn't look up, just grunts. Not your pay grade. And that's the truth of it. Cheese, here, is not just food. It's rank. Your wedge says, you row. Theirs says, you command. You begin noticing other signs. Office's cheese is wrapped in waxed linen. Yours comes loose, crusted with salt, sometimes soft in the middle from being stored too near the boiler. They get cuts. You get chunks. They get brie. You get brine. One day, the quartermaster misplaces a box. An officer's ration ends up in the lower deck by accident. It's chaos. 2 men fight for it. A third offers his shoes. A fourth grabs it and runs. The chase lasts 15 minutes and ends with someone falling into the livestock pen. The cheese is never recovered. The officers laugh. You don't. Later, one officer strolls below deck and offers you a slice from his own plate. To boost morale, he says, you accept it with trembling hands. It's creamy, nutty. It doesn't make your eyes water. You chew once, twice. It melts. And then it's gone. For a moment, you feel human again. Then you look down at your usual ration. And you remember your place. Even the superstitions shift with the class lines. Your mold is a curse. Theirs is a delicate bloom. Your rot is dangerous. Theirs is aged. Your squeaking wedge is alive. Theirs is mature. One man gets clever. Trades 2 rum rations and a clean shirt for a slice of officer's cheese. He's caught, punished, flogged, but he smiles through it. Says it was worth it. You don't doubt him. The captain, to his credit, once offers to swap rations with a crewman as a gesture. But only once. The crewman, new, wide-eyed, hopeful, accepts. That night, he vomits. 3 times. Says it was the mold. The captain's stomach? Untroubled. Turns out, officers build resistance. Or maybe it's just better cheese. You never see another swap. The difference between the decks becomes a quiet wound. You still row, still haul, still eat what you're given. But every so often, you catch yourself staring at the quarterdeck. Wondering what it tastes like up there. Wondering how much a wheel of cheddar is really worth. Wondering if, one day, you'll hold it in your hands and not have to share. Until then, you chew your ration slowly. Not for nourishment, but for spite. The barrel that should have been thrown overboard. You knew from the moment they cracked it open, it was wrong. The air changed, turned thick, like it had weight, like it had teeth. The smell didn't creep, it lunged. Filled the galley in seconds. Curled around the beams, and slapped every man across the face. Eyes watered, knees buckled. The quartermaster staggered back like he'd been struck. No one spoke. You all just stared. The barrel was marked, but not in any official way. No log entry. No inventory number. Just a single, dark handprint on the lid. No one knew who put it there. Some swore it was already aboard when the ship left port. Others said it was stashed months ago during a storm, forgotten. Ignored. Feared. But now, it was open. And its contents were angry. The cheese inside looked like it had melted, not from heat, but from surrender. Yellow-brown goo slumped at the bottom. Patches of black mold pulsed at the surface. As if breathing, one sailor leaned in to poke it with a stick and recoiled. Muttering something about a twitch. You knew what needed to happen. You all knew. That barrel should have been thrown overboard the second the lid came loose. And yet, the captain said no. We're low on stores. He said, we use what we have. Spoken like a man who hadn't smelled it himself. So the quartermaster resealed the lid. But it was too late. The smell wouldn't go. For the next 3 days. It haunted the lower deck. You'd catch a whiff while walking past the galley. Find a drop of oily liquid near your boots. One sailor woke gagging. Claimed he dreamed of drowning in cheese. Another swore he saw flies crawling under the barrel lid. And still, it stayed. Because that's what this ship does. It endures what should be abandoned. Rotting wood, rotten luck, and now, a rotting god hiding in a cheese cask. Historians still argue whether such barrels truly existed. Some believe they're folklore, sailors' tales meant to pass the time or justify a spate of illness. But logs do record barrels mysteriously discarded at sea. One entry in 1759 reads simply, "Barrel 16 gone." No record. Smell unbearable. You believe it, because you were there. One night, you draw kitchen duty. You're told to check the lower stores. You know what that means. The cursed barrel. The monster. You bring gloves. You bring courage. Neither help. You find the barrel sweating in the dark. Moisture trickles from beneath the lid. You swear the wood creaks when you approach. You whisper to yourself. Maybe a prayer. Maybe an apology. You don't even know. You touch it. It's warm. Not room temperature. Warm. Alive warm. You stumble back. Your stomach lurches. The smell clings to you. You strip your gloves. Scrub your hands. Nothing works. You sleep that night wrapped in canvas to keep the stench away. It doesn't help. Soon, the ship starts feeling it too. Men get sick. 3 go down with fever. 1 starts muttering about holes in the hull that no one else can see. The cook finds mushrooms growing behind the dry goods. Another claims the compass spins when he passes the galley. No one blames the cheese, out loud. But eyes linger on that barrel. Heads turn whenever someone mentions the stores. You all know. You all feel it. The ship is heavier somehow. Like the barrel's not just cheese anymore. Like it's grief. Like it's guilt. Finally, someone breaks. The bosun. Big. Stoic. Not known for drama. He hauls the barrel to the main deck in the dead of night, dragging it with ropes like it's a prisoner. You hear the thump 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 of it climbing the steps. Then shouting. You reach the deck just in time to see him heave it over the side. Splash. Silence. Then, applause. No ceremony. No punishment. Just relief. The air lightens. The deck breathes. You breathe. For the first time in days. The galley is tolerable. The nightmares stop. Well, mostly. You still see it sometimes. In dreams. A barrel floating beside the hull. Lid open. A shape rising. It wears your face. You wake up sweating. You eat your ration the next day. It's hard. Dry. Familiar. You're grateful for it. You don't ask where it came from. And when a new barrel arrives from port, clean, sealed tight, you whisper a quiet plea to whatever powers guard your gut. Let it stay dead, because some barrels should never be opened. And some cheese isn't food. It's a warning. How cheese became a survival gamble. The thing about food at sea is this: it's not about flavor. It's about chance. Each time you lift your ration to your mouth, you're gambling, not just with your digestion, but with your dignity, your dreams, and occasionally your place in the afterlife. Because cheese, as you've learned, isn't a meal. It's a dare in edible form. You've seen it play out again and again. The rookie sailor, thin and sunburned, receives his first wedge. It looks harmless, slightly dry, a little moldy, nothing compared to the horror stories. He bites, chews, swallows. He makes it through. The next morning, he's curled in his hammock, pale and groaning, muttering about bells and bees. For 3 days he can't hold food. Or thoughts. Was it the cheese? Or something else? That's the thing, you never know. That's the gamble. Your daily ration becomes an act of faith. You stare at it, sniff it, tap it once or twice like a suspicious package. Then you bite, slowly, waiting for the signs. A sting, a twitch, a taste that's too familiar. Or too new. Some days it's fine, others, it lingers on your tongue like a bad idea. Still, you eat it. Because there are only 3 options on a ship like this. Eat the cheese. Chew your boot leather. Or drink seawater. Boot leather isn't as filling as people think. And seawater? That's a fast track to madness. So you eat. And roll the dice. One sailor swears by the scratch test. Run your nail across the wedge. If it crumbles, it's safe. If it bends, toss it. Another believes in the rat test. Leave it out for an hour. If the rats touch it, it's probably edible. If they ignore it, burn it. You come up with your own. Shake it next to your ear. If it squelches, don't even unwrap it. Historians still argue how sailors managed their rations under extreme conditions. Some believe men adapted, building tolerance to bacteria and mold. Others argue that desperation simply outpaced caution, that hunger eroded sense, and survival outlasted fear. You lean toward both. Because there are days when you know the cheese is bad. Not by smell or taste, but by vibe. It feels wrong, heavy in the hand, damp in weird places, one edge soft, the other brittle. But you're hungry, so you eat. And later, when your stomach gurgles and your head spins, you whisper to yourself, should have gone with the leather. You've seen men carve shapes into their cheese. Not for fun, for control. If you can mold it, it's probably not fossilized. If it holds a smiley face, maybe it won't betray you. One man etched a cross into his wedge every morning. Ate it only after prayer. He never got sick. He also slept with a dagger under his pillow. Draw your own conclusions. Then there's the red cheese. A myth, maybe, said to appear once per voyage. Crimson streaks in the center. Sweet smelling. Soft. Beautiful. Deadly. No one admits to having seen it. But everyone knows someone who has. And no one who eats it lives to confirm the story. Like a ghost. Or a siren. A wedge that whispers your name. Superstition? Probably. But when you see a streak in your wedge one morning, you scrape it out. Fast. Just in case. The gamble becomes part of the rhythm. Every day, you gather with your mates. Sit on overturned barrels. Tap your cheese like gamblers sizing up cards. Some go all in, scarfing it fast. Others nibble like mice, watching each other for signs of doom. You become fluent in symptoms. A glance, a wince, a bead of sweat. Bad wedge. Someone mutters, should have passed. But here's the twist. Some men prefer the risky ones. The ones with a little funk. A little slime. Keeps the belly sharp. They say, builds grit. You think they're insane. But then again, they rarely get sick. Maybe it's all in the mind. You even start to miss it when the cheese is too fresh. Too clean. That kind comes once a year. Maybe. A port delivery gone right. Everyone cheers. But the taste? Boring. Flat. Lacking that sense of danger you've come to associate with every bite. You shake your head. You're broken. See, broken. Still, you eat. Because this is what survival looks like on the sea. Not a glorious duel or heroic stand. Just a man, chewing slowly, trying to guess if today's cheese will send him to the latrine or the stars. You once saw a man whisper to his wedge before each bite. Called it cheese confession. Said the wheel listens. Judges, you thought he was mad. You do it now too. Not always. Just when the mold runs deep. Because the truth is, the sea takes its toll in all kinds of ways. In wind and wave, in sleep and sanity. But most often, one bite at a time. Secret cheese hacks of the desperate cook. If you think your suffering ends when the cheese hits the plate, you clearly haven't met the ship's cook. Down in the galley, where the air is thicker than soup and everything smells like burnt rope and boiled salt, the cook wages a daily war. His enemy? The cheese. His weapons? Fire, rum, desperation, and a profound disregard for the laws of culinary decency. You see, no one likes the cheese. Not even the cook. But he's stuck with it. Just like you. Worse still, he has to do something with it. Serve it, mask it, maybe even, on a rare, delusional day, make it enjoyable. Thus begins the saga of secret cheese hacks. Let's start with the most common trick. Rum soak. The idea is simple. Take the worst wedge, dunk it in the cheapest rum, and let it sit overnight. The result? A soggy, pungent sponge that smells like a tavern floor but tastes marginally less tragic. The rum dulls the bitterness, masks the ammonia, and numbs your mouth just enough to forget you're eating regret. Sort of. You try it once. The flavor is confusing. Like someone soaked a leather boot in cough syrup. But hey, it's warm, and your teeth don't bleed. Then there's the flame lick. Not to cook it. Oh no. Just to sear off whatever might be alive. The cook sets the cheese on a flat pan, blasts it with flame for exactly 3 seconds, and flips it with a knife that's definitely seen battle. The result is a blistered, bubbling crust that hisses when you touch it. Not edible. Exactly, but it feels intentional. And that matters. Historians still argue whether these hacks had any real nutritional value or were simply morale tricks. Culinary sleight of hand to keep men from jumping ship. Some old logs list flavored cheese as a menu item. though no record exists of what it was flavored with. You suspect sorrow. You once catch the cook trying the fruit mash. He crushes old dried figs and smears them across a wedge, declaring it a sea tart. You try a bite. The sweetness hits first, then the salt, then an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Your mouth is confused, so is your stomach, but you finish it, because, again, options are limited. Then comes the pan slop, a mix of cheese scraps, grease, biscuit crumbs, and something else. No one asks. It's poured into a tin cup and baked over the stove until it forms a crust. When served, it's steaming, slightly spicy, and oddly comforting, if you close your eyes and pretend it's not food. Some sailors swear by the cheese tea. Hot water, a pinch of salt, and a few shavings of the softest cheese left in the barrel. Let it melt, stir once, drink fast. It's oily, it's murky, but it warms. One man claims it cured his scurvy. The surgeon disagrees, loudly, but not every hack is successful. There's the time the cook tried to smoke the cheese using rope fibers. The result? A wedge that tasted like wet firewood and left your throat dry for 2 days. Another time, he grated it, yes, grated, into stew. The stew curdled. So did your will to live. And of course, there was the midnight fondue disaster. It began with a half-barrel of semi-soft cheese that had started to ferment in earnest. The cook, emboldened by a bottle of stolen brandy, decided to melt it, add spices, make it elegant. He served it in bowls, called it a continental delicacy. The first bite was fine. The second bite caused 3 men to collapse. One man laughed for an hour. Another forgot his own name. The fondue was quietly dumped at sea before sunrise. No one spoke of it again. But despite the disasters, you respect the cook. He's not a chef. He's a sorcerer working with curses. A mad scientist trying to make alchemy from rot. He starts naming his creations. Barnacle bake, briny pie, mare's crumble. None of them make sense. All of them are edible. Barely. And sometimes, when the wind is good and the sun forgives, one of his hacks works. You get a bite that's almost savory. A crust that holds. A wedge that doesn't bite back. You look up, smile, say, "What's in this?" He grins. Don't ask. And you never do. Because at sea, flavor isn't about taste. It's about hope. A momentary break in the bleak. A bite that reminds you of land. Of possibility. Of food that doesn't come with a gamble. So tomorrow, when he slides something new across the table, a smear, a lump, a cube glistening with mystery, you'll bite. You always do. Because even the worst cheese can surprise you. Cheese and ghost stories of the watch. The midnight watch is when things start to whisper. You stand there, wrapped in your damp coat. Hands numb, breath misting in the chill. The ship creaks around you, wood complaining. Ropes swaying. The occasional slap of wave against hull. Normal sounds. Mostly familiar. Except, something else moves out here too. You don't see it, not clearly, but you feel it. The old hands say it's the cheese. Not the mold, not the worms, not the meals gone wrong. No, they're talking about something deeper. Something spiritual. Cheese that's aged too long. Handled too carelessly. Stored too close to suffering. Cheese that doesn't just rot, it remembers. The galley, they say, is haunted. You laugh. Once. The first time you hear it. Then someone tells you about the moaning wheel, a wedge of Stilton sealed in wax. Left behind from a voyage 6 years back. They say when the wind's just right, it hums, low, like a voice calling from the cargo hold. You scoff. Until one night, you hear it, soft, steady, like a sailor singing in reverse. You don't sleep well after that. It's not just sounds. It's sightings. Wedges that vanish from locked boxes. Cheese that's warm despite the cold. A barrel lid that rocks without touch. Once, someone swore they saw a face in the rind, eyes, mouth, open in warning. He cut it anyway. He broke 2 teeth. And then there are the stories. One passed down for years. A ship in the Caribbean that found a stowaway wheel. It wasn't on the manifest. Wasn't claimed. They kept it anyway. It fed the crew for weeks. Then the fever came. One by one. The men went mad. When the ship finally limped into port, there were only 3 survivors. All of them mute. And the wheel? Missing. Historians, of course, dismiss these tales. They call them sailors' yarn. The product of dehydration, cabin fever, and poor lighting. But they weren't there. They didn't see the mold that spread upward, or the way the crew avoided a certain crate without knowing why. You start to believe it when Jenkins, yes, him again, comes back from the lower hold. Pale and shivering. He'd gone down to fetch onions. Came back without them. Said the cheese was breathing. Could be the humidity. Someone offers. No. Jenkins whispers. It exhaled. Another time. You're on late watch. Eyes drooping. When you spot a shape. Small. Rounded. At the base of the mainmast. You blink. It's gone. In its place? A faint sour smell. You tell yourself it's nothing. But you don't eat your cheese that night. The ghost stories evolve. Take on detail. The wedge that bled. The cheese knife that screams. A wheel that rolled down a tilted deck and never stopped. Some say cursed cheese brings bad weather. Others say it protects, but only if kept under your pillow and fed crumbs once a week. You laugh at that one. But the next morning, your bunkmate's wedge is gone. Replaced by salt. You stop laughing. The cook pretends he doesn't hear things in the galley. Pretends the door doesn't creak open by itself. Pretends the barrel at the back, unlabeled, unclaimed, doesn't get closer every time he turns around. Bad hinges, he says. But he sleeps on deck now. There's one tale no one tells lightly. About a ship where every cheese wedge had a name. That's all anyone remembers. Not the flag, not the crew. Just that each wedge bore a name, and no one left the voyage unchanged. You begin naming your own ration. Silently. You don't tell anyone, but when it starts crumbling before dinner, you mutter, "Not today, Edgar, just in case." And still, the stories go on. The cheese that wrote symbols in the mold. The wheel that caused 3 men to weep uncontrollably for a week. The wedge that vanished, and was later found in someone's boot. Still whole, still warm. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's believable. Because after months at sea, sleep-starved and salt-soaked, you begin to understand. Cheese isn't just food here. It's part of the ship. It learns. It lingers. It becomes a presence. You eat it anyway. Because what's scarier than a haunted cheese? Hunger. So you chew. And pray it stays quiet tonight. Why you'll never see cheese the same again. By now, your hands are calloused. Your teeth are worn thin. And your trust in anything soft, yellow, or slightly squishy has been permanently damaged. That wedge of ship's cheese you once stared at with a hint of hunger? You now eye it like an unpredictable X. Something that once comforted you but has long since earned your wariness. You're sitting on a crate near the stern. Boots half-laced. Jacket collar flipped up against the breeze. In your hand, today's cheese ration, a wedge the color of a sunburnt lemon. With edges that seem to curl like paper left too long in the rain. You don't eat it right away. No, not anymore. Now, you observe it, turn it over, tap it like a gemstone dealer appraising a ruby. You're not just checking for mold. You're checking for memories. Because you've seen things. You've seen wedges that screamed when sliced. Barrels that sweated in the cold. Cheese that refused to sink when thrown overboard, just floated there. Like a smug, yellow omen. And now, with the end of your voyage approaching, you realize something deeper. This cheese has outlasted storms. Outlived half the crew. And lingered longer in your psyche than most of your family members. You've shared rations during sunrises that bled gold across a still sea. You've chewed quietly through watch shifts under the stars. Talking nonsense with men who feared pirates less than dairy. You've sat in silence with a crewmate who lost a toe, not to battle, but to a wedge that shattered like flint. The cheese remembers. And so do you. One sailor tried to write a song about it. The Ballad of the Barrel Cheese. He got halfway through the first verse before he gagged and switched to a tale about sea serpents instead. Funnier that way. Safer, too. Even now, with the scent of land creeping into the wind, the cheese doesn't let go. You dream of it, not always in nightmares. Oddly enough, sometimes it just sits there, on a table, watching, waiting, occasionally oozing. You'll be back on land soon, shoes on dry stone. Market stalls with fresh bread, glistening fruits, and cheeses that don't smell like they carry a grudge. You'll try to act normal. You'll smile politely at dinner parties. Maybe even accept a slice of brie. But deep inside, you'll hesitate. You'll hear the creak of the barrel, the echo of Jenkins screaming. It blinked. Someone will say, "It's just cheese." You'll nod, but they weren't there. They didn't see the wheel that glowed in the moonlight. Didn't watch the cook cross himself before opening the crate. Didn't lose 5 hours of time after biting into what turned out to be a fermented sponge in disguise. They don't know about the red wedge. You do. And you always will. There's something about suffering that binds people together. You'll always remember the way sailors gathered in silence around their rations. Tapping, sniffing, poking, like archaeologists unearthing cursed artifacts. You'll remember the nicknames, Barnacle Butter, the Kraken's Cracker, Unholy Gouda, each a little joke to hide the real fear. The fear that today's wedge might be the one that tips the balance. You're not superstitious, but you don't eat cheese on Tuesdays anymore. Just in case. There's also gratitude. Strange, slow growing, but real, because while the cheese betrayed your trust, battered your guts, and occasionally wept in its sleep, it also kept you alive. Sort of, barely. A crumbling, weirdly warm lifeline you could chew. And now? Now, you find yourself looking at that wedge in your hand with something dangerously close to affection. You hate it, but you also admire it. The resilience, the audacity, the sheer, moldy determination to exist. It's not a food, it's a philosophy. You take a small bite, just to prove you still can. It tastes like soap and wood, maybe despair, but also victory. Historians still argue whether ship's cheese played a major role in sailor morale or merely became the scapegoat for poor hygiene and worse leadership. Some even claim it was intentionally made inedible to keep men from eating too much too quickly. A slow ration meant a longer voyage. And maybe that was true. Maybe someone, somewhere, engineered this whole dairy dystopia. But you have another theory. The cheese was there to humble you. To remind you that life at sea wasn't about luxury or ease. It was about grit, endurance, laughing through your nausea, making friends in misery, and learning, bit by bit, wedge by wedge, to let go of expectation and just chew. The wind shifts. A gull cries above. Land is near. You tuck the cheese back into its wrapping. Not because you'll finish it later, but because you've learned never to waste something that might be needed again. You stand, stretch, and watch the horizon blur into something gentle. It's almost over. But the story? The story is yours forever. Now the waves have softened. And so has the wind. The sails hang a little quieter tonight. And the groan of the wood beneath your feet feels less like warning. More like lullaby. You've made it through something strange, through salted nights and moldy mornings. Through laughter born of survival and friendships forged over meals best forgotten. The cheese is behind you now. Almost. Because as your body begins to relax and the rhythm of the sea pulls you closer to sleep, you know it's still with you, somewhere in your memory, tucked beside the stars and the storm and the low, warm voice of the cook saying, "Eat it fast, before it eats you." You close your eyes. There's no more need to resist. Let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts slow like the wind through a resting sail. Let the rhythm of the ship cradle you, not as a sailor anymore, but as someone who has endured, who has tasted the strange, and still found room to laugh. Tonight, you don't need to be brave. You don't need to test the cheese, outwit the ration, or name the wedge. You can just rest. Safe, full, whole. Let the salt fade from your lips. Let the horizon disappear behind your eyelids. Let the silence stretch long and low and lovely. Sleep, sailor. You've earned it. Sweet dreams.